Welcome to the third of 4 webinars in the series for Lutheran Service Builder. Today, as you can see on the screen, we'll be discussing the topic of presentation and presentation formats. Let me first introduce myself here. I am Tim Burke, a software support technician here at Concordia Technology Solutions. I've been a technician here for just a little over 9 years. And helping me today is our manager, Rod Kiles. And he'll be on the back end of things. You won't see him on the camera, but he'll be addressing some of those questions that you put in your questions window there on your side of things. And I appreciate Rod's help today. All right, our training this week has come in 4 sessions. On Monday, we discussed service planning and global search. That's kind of the foundation of getting started in the application. Then yesterday, Tuesday, we talked about bulletins and bulletin formats, and that's the most attended webinar out of the series of 4. And so a lot of churches use bulletins for their services. Today, Wednesday, we're talking about presentation and presentation formats, and that's to be used with PowerPoint if you project the service on either TV type monitors or possibly with a projector up on a screen in the front of the church. And then tomorrow, on Thursday, we'll kind of finish up the series of 4 trainings with My Worship resources and other add-ons. This is a lot of custom work in that particular session. So if that interests you, then come back again tomorrow morning, same time. All right, so today our focus is on presentation formats. A few housekeeping notes. I plan on 50 minutes for presentation, and then we'll round out the hour with about 10 minutes to cover any questions that weren't answered. All of the attendees are muted so that we can get through the presentation smoothly without disruption. But I would like for you to ask your questions throughout. Just plug them into the little questions window that you have on your side, and that way you can keep my manager, Rod, busy. And anything that he doesn't answer or that he doesn't quite get to by the end, then I will cover in the questions and answers, the Q&A session at the last 10 minutes or so. And then just as a reminder, the recording will be shared. You'd have to give us a couple days just to review the videos that were recorded each day and then get them linked and an email sent out to you if you were registered. And then we'll also make them available in our resource center sometime in the near future. All right, our training goal today is by the end of today, you will know how to prepare a complete presentation and export it from Lutheran Service Builder. The outline for today is we'll talk about inserting, selecting, and removing elements from the presentation slide deck. We'll talk about how to change elements and how they appear on the slides. We'll customize presentation formats to kind of add a little maybe graphics and color to our presentation. And then we'll also export the presentation out to PowerPoint in this case. There's also an export to MediaShout 6. I don't have that particular application on my computer here, so we'll focus on PowerPoint today. All right, let's go ahead then and get started. Let me get to our application up on the screen. There we go. All right, so what you should see is the calendar view of Lutheran Service Builder. If you remember, the URL for the application is app.lutheranservicebuilder.com. And when you plug in that URL, you'll arrive here on the calendar. And then you'll need to check the upper right corner here for the sign-in prompt. If you aren't currently signed in, then you'll see the word sign in at the top. So that's what we'll click on right now. and then I'll sign in with my current credentials and get into my account. All right, so now that I'm signed into my account, it displays the calendar. And we'll do just a little bit of review today. The calendar is showing the service that we have been working on in the past previous 2 webinar sessions. The service for this coming Sunday, June 16th, and we named it 8 a.m. early service. And we talked about how when you see on the calendar services that are in bold, that those are services that already have a service plan started. Everything else in just a normal font, for example, this Pentecost 5 on the 23rd, that has not been worked with yet or had, nothing has been planned in that service, so that's still just a standard font. But that gives you an idea of what we're looking at here on the calendar. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the service that we have been working on and talk about just a brief review of what we've done so far. On the first day, we chose, well, first of all, let me point out that we're now in the service plan. That's the next step. We've got all of our readings put together, the hymns selected, the order of service, divine service setting 3. We had a couple additional rites that we added. And then down here at the bottom, we added some notes. That was all mainly from session 1 in working with the service plan and the global search option. Then yesterday, we moved to the upper right corner and we talked about preparing a bulletin. And I won't go and review that today, but that was all about setting up the service, seeing it in a continuous order of service type of format and making edits and changes to that service. Now, the nice thing that the application does have is that if you were then, if your next step, I'm sorry, let's move that arrow in a little bit closer. If your next step was to prepare a presentation, all of those edits and changes that we did yesterday in Prepare a Bulletin would already be made in your presentation view as well. And so that might save a lot of steps for you. You won't have to edit in both places because the editing that you did in bulletins yesterday would go ahead and follow through to the presentation as well. But there is a caveat to that, is that if we were then to go in the PowerPoint presentation, or I shouldn't say the word PowerPoint because you might be going to Media Shout as well, but just preparing the presentation, if we make any changes or edits there, that will also be in a way backwards compatible, I guess, with the bulletin, and it will make those same changes in the bulletin. So you've got a couple options. You could, if you're using both of these options, I mean, some churches just do bulletins and they don't do presentations. And then also the reverse is possible, where some churches then just do presentations and they don't print out a bulletin. Or I should say they maybe print out a bulletin, but they don't include the order of service in the bulletin. And so then they go directly to the presentation. And that's all fine, but if you happen to be using both, you might want to complete your bulletin first and make all of the edits there, and then export that out to Microsoft Word. That way you've got your completed bulletin and you don't have to worry about then moving on to the presentation format and making some changes there, and that which might accidentally change some of the settings in the bulletin as well. The other option I should point out is if we went back to the calendar here, we could take our service that we have. Let's see, let's just click into it here, go to the service plan and make a copy of the service. And let's just go ahead and say presentation and then save that. Let me refresh the screen. I've got a block on my screen that prevented me from finishing that. All right, so then we've got well, let's go back to the calendar just visually. So we've got an 8 a.m. early service. I could put the word bulletin behind that. And then I have an 8 a.m. Early service for the presentation. And that way you could keep those services separate and you won't take the chance of making a formatting change, or you might tweak the presentation a little bit differently than your bulletin view, and you want to make sure that the changes don't affect the other. So let's go ahead. I'll just use the copy here, the presentation for our example today. And let's see, we are going to then go up to the upper right corner and to click Prepare a Presentation. All right, so what we have here in the presentation view, I'll use my little arrow here in the upper left corner. We've got the cross, which will always take us back to that calendar view. It's the same way with the other sessions that we've already had this week. Then you have an undo and redo arrow. You've got the current tab that we have open, the document tab, and that's what it defaults to when you originally get here. And then there also is an option here at the top in a tab form to insert things into your presentation, insert other service elements. Here on the far right is the current service that we're in, that we're working with. But if you click on that phrase or the little drop down arrow next to it, then you'll always have access to those 5 main areas of working in Lutheran Service Builder. You can go to the propers for today or for the service you're working with. You can go to back to the service plan. You can go to bulletin view. Right here, we're in prepare presentation. And then if you happen to have the Concordia organists, which is the playlist feature, we'll talk about that tomorrow, by the way. You can also go there all from that upper right corner. And then also in the upper right corner is the settings icon. Underneath that is the toolbar for the Documents tab. That's the tab that we currently have open. And so what we'll see here first is a way to export the presentation. When you click on that, it will give you the option of either PowerPoint or Media Shout 6. Media Shout 6 is a little bit dated. I believe that they're on a newer version than 6 right now. But when the version after 6 came out, it was quite a big jump from Media Shout 6. And we don't have a whole lot of churches that are using Media Shout. And so we didn't keep up with the versions that Media Shout has come out with. So it still works with Media Shout 6. If you are a church that uses Media Shout and you'd like to see Lutheran Service Builder updated, just send us a comment or some feedback that that is something that you'd be interested in. It just takes a lot of programming time and resources, and if not many people are using it, we may not go down that path. But let us know if even besides Media Shout as a topic, if you've got other ideas for Lutheran Service Builder, please forward those along to us as comments, as feedback, and we'll be glad to consider your ideas. Next to that is the current presentation format. We're going to talk about that the latter half of the webinar today, but right now we're just using the basic presentation format. Next to that is an edit button, so if there is any edits that you'd like to make within the presentation, then you can simply click on that edit button. We'll use that here in a little bit, just kind of giving you an idea of the rundown of the buttons here at the top. Next to that is the order of service that we're currently using, is Divine Service Setting 3. Once you get here to the presentation, you can always change the Divine Service setting if you'd like. There's a whole scrollable list here of different orders of services that are available in Lutheran Service Builder, so feel free to explore and experiment with that if you'd like to see what those are all about and how they look in a presentation format way. But that's what that selector is, showing you what you currently have selected, and that came over from our service plan as well as came right through from the bulletin as well. And then next to that is a save button. So if you do make tweaks to this particular order of service, the DS3 that we have up here at the top, and you make some tweaks that you would like to make part of every week in your order of service. Maybe you remove some kind of service element or elements from the normal Divine Service Setting 3, or you've added some additional elements like we did yesterday with a children's message, then you can click the Save button and modify the name of Divine Service Setting 3 a little bit. You might call it Modified DS3. And then you can use that order of service going forward, and it will have all of the tweaks already present in that order of service that you previously had made. So we'll talk about that as well. Now, along the left side is our slide deck here. It's a scrollable list. And of course, we'll just start here at the top of this with the very first slide. You can see the scrollable, the scroll bar there on the right to the right of the slide deck. Once you click on a slide, each of these slides is a service element. So when we click on the slide, just as we saw yesterday with bulletins, another tab opens up letting you know the slide that you've clicked on, and it will also show the tools that are available, or action buttons that are available for this particular slide. So we click on heading. The two options we have are to move the slide somewhere else or delete it. This is a heading slide. Once it's clicked on, you could just drag and drop it, and if you see on your end of things, there's a little insert point, a blue line with a blue triangle, and it lets you know where you would insert it. So I could move down below the slide stand, release my mouse here, and now Confession and Absolution heading slide appears after that. You can also just click on the Move button, and then you hover your cursor over the slide deck, and that same blue line appears. I'll move it back here to the top. I'll click right here with my mouse, and that heading slide moves back to the top. These slides are editable, not edible, but here right on the preview, I could click here on the slide and change, or let's see, let's add a word, and then click away, and then that becomes part of the heading. So you can edit the screen. It's just not a protected preview of it. Let's go ahead and backspace over that, click away. Now the plus sign or the cross sign that you're seeing here, that's being applied by the presentation format, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but that's why those automatically appear at the moment. The next slide down is the hymn of invocation. Clicking on that will open up the hymn search panel here on the right, and we could, in this case, I didn't save the selection that I had made in the bulletin format yesterday, or I think I had a baptism right there in the beginning of the service, and I removed that for today's session. And so it put the hymn of invocation back there. We'll go ahead then and select, I think we'll select something newer down here. I'll click on 720, and that puts that hymn right there in place of the placeholder of hymn. It does create a slide for each stanza. We can just click through the stanzas, and if you notice here on the left that it is a little indented in here, showing that that's the second slide in this series for the hymn, and each of the stanzas do have the caption at the top of the slide, and then it ends here with this last one, which then that's where the copyright information shows. Once we've clicked on the hymn, then we have a set of tools that I want to talk about. So here in this first one, it has the word all on there with a drop-down arrow. You can have the caption on all slides, as we see here. There's the caption, and we kind of see it in the preview here on the left side on each slide. And so that's what currently was selected. If you want it just on the first slide, then you'll notice that 720 We Walk by Faith is listed there, but it has now been removed from all of the following stanzas. It's really just preference. You could separate the caption from the stanza slide, so I'll choose that, and that creates then one slide just for the hymn number and name, and then the stanzas follow without that caption and that number. And then the final option here is just none, and all we have is it drops right in from the heading of confession and absolution into the first slide. There's no descriptor there. It's just this is the stanza 1 of the first hymn. So those are all, whatever you prefer. I'm going to leave it on the default of all. Some of the other buttons here, some of these are kind of given in a way in groups. So we've got 3 buttons here. Right now, text is being shown, which is what we have in the preview. Another option would be melody and none for the content of the hymn. Let's change some of those. If I wanted the melody on the slide, click melody, and then now that has been added to each stanza, each slide that comes after. If we have none, it's simply going to be a slide here on the left that will be displayed on your monitor or your screen there in church, and then everyone would just go to their Lutheran Service book in the pew and open that up to 720 and sing from there. So those are the 3 options there from the top. Let's go back just to simply having text. After that, we have the ability to select stanzas. You can click on select all or select none, and then click on just the ones that you want. Let's do 1, 2, and 4. You can maybe see while I was making those check marks, those selections, that the slides were also changing. And so now we just have those 3 stanzas. Over here on the left, stanza 1 is currently displayed. There's stanza 2, and I'll click on stanza 3 with the copyright in this case, since that's the last one we chose. I'm sorry, that was stanza 4, not 3, that we chose. And then we have the ability to edit this particular hymn, or as we did in the previous slide, move or delete it. Let's go ahead and slide down here. The next slide that we click on then is displaying the name rubric at the top. You can move the rubric or delete it up here with the tools, and you can edit right here on the slide itself. So, maybe I want to add the word please stand instead of just stand. And so you could change that slide, click away, and now even the preview shows the please stand option. We can also just remove these rubrics since they will be spoken most likely in the service, and you don't need a separate slide just for the word stand unless that's what you prefer. I'm going to go ahead and delete this rubric. I'll probably delete all of these rubrics, and I should point out here in the beginning that right now we're doing it in the presentation itself, deleting each one of these separately. But once we get to the format under settings up here in just a little bit, we could choose the option just to remove all rubrics across the board, across the whole service, and then we wouldn't have to do each of these individual deletes in the service themselves. So that's something to keep in mind, and I'll point that out when we get to the presentation format. So let's go ahead and delete this. Here's another rubric, and that points or that shows up here at the top on the tab, and we can also move or delete this one. And earlier, or in the previous slide, I just clicked the delete button at the top, but you can also right click here on the slide itself with your mouse and choose delete there if you'd rather. Those are just, you can use the toolbar or the right click context menu for some of these changes. Let's click on the invocation. So the invocation tab shows up at the top. Again, we have the caption being put on all slides if there are more. On just the first separate or none, I'll keep it the way it is. We can have text or none, and so then with none selected, it removes all the dialogue. It just leaves the invocation caption. Let's go ahead and leave the dialogue there, and we can edit this and move and delete it. Let's move on to the exhortation. And so the exhortation then is placed there with some of the same toolbar options as the previous slide. And I do also want to mention in this particular slide that if you have haven't noticed, over here on the right side is the search panel. And for whatever slide you click on, it will always highlight the element that's chosen currently, but it will also give you some other options if you'd rather pull in the exhortation from Divine Service setting 1, 2, or 4, or 5. Right now, this is the one from 3, as it shows right there. But you can, this is giving you other options to select from here on the right side. And all you need to do is click on it if you wanted to change the version of the exhortation. Let's scroll down again to kneel, stand, and then once again you could just type in please kneel, stand if you'd like, and I'm just going to right click on it and delete. We've got another rubric here. I'll right click and delete. The confession of sins appears here, just pointing some things out. We've got that selected here. With other versions, the topic says here of confession of sins. You can pick from anything scrolling down the line here. And I also want to point out with this particular element, that's a little different from the other ones. We're seeing a blue line with a little blue triangle at the top, just as it was in our bulletin our bulletin view, preparing the bulletin. We have that same type of option here in presentations, and that is indicating that there is an option to the confession of sins. And I made mention of in the Lutheran Service Book hymnal, sometimes you have a left side and a right side option in the hymnal, and that's what this is, to some degree referring to. So if we were to click on that blue line or the blue triangle here on the left side, that's going to then expand and show us the other options that are there. Here's confession of sins with the declaration of grace, in case you have like a vicar there at your church and you might need to use that version instead. But we'll just go ahead and stick with the confession of sins as well as the absolution. We'll scroll down a little farther. Here's another rubric. I'll right click and delete. Then we come to a heading, service of the word. If you would like to display that in your presentation through PowerPoint, that is totally up to you, just a preference. I'll go ahead and delete it in this case. The introit is now showing with a blue bar here on the left side, so we can click on that, which I've just done, and that shows that the other option that we have is the psalm in 2 slides, or an entrance hymn. That would be the third option there. But we'll go ahead and keep it with the introit as displayed, because there are some tools that I want to point out that are a little different for this particular service element. And so we've got, again, the caption setting of all slides, or if you just want it on the first separate slide, or whatever your preference is. I'm going to keep the text. I'm not going to remove it all and select none instead. But here's where we have some other options. The pointing, and that is referring to these vertical lines and the asterisks in each of these lines, and that's where the singing of the introit then changes, and your organist and music director would make use of those if the introit is sung. And so if you, right now by default, that pointing option is depressed, and so they're showing, but I'm going to click on the button right now, and then you'll notice that it has removed all of those asterisks and lines for singing. I'll go ahead and include it there, and then, because that kind of works hand in hand here, if you're going to include pointing, then there also is the option to select a psalm tone. So you click on the drop-down menu, and then you've got the different psalm tones that are available, A through H in this case, or I guess through K. And if if the organist happens to know the one that they want to use, let's just go ahead and take something like H this particular time, and then that gets placed on the slide as well if you would like that on the slide. There is an option here for template, where we'll talk about that more under when we get to a reading, and then the ability to edit, move, and delete. Let's go down a little further. We've got the Gloria Patri, and that has the melody already assigned. I think we placed that melody on it because normally it would come in just through text, but we placed the melody in the bulletin, and so that carried through here to the PowerPoint presentation. So if you were then just to change it to text here, it would then take that melody away from the bulletin as well. So that's where I was mentioning earlier that you'll want to be careful on the editing that you do in these, or if you can just get organized enough, you'll kind of know what changes you should make to each of these presentation modes, the bulletin as well as the PowerPoint presentation, and at what time you should make the edits, and if the other presentation or the other bulletin was already exported. All right, so we'll leave that. Well, let me also show that the settings, since this is Divine Service Setting 3, we talked about this yesterday as well, that Divine Service Setting 3 does have the option to include the 4-part harmony on liturgy elements, not hymns, but liturgy elements. So we've got the soprano, alto, tenor, bass parts of each of these if you choose setting. But a lot of churches will just go with melody to keep things consistent, even across the board, along with their hymns. Then there's also the option for none, edit, move, and delete. Let's continue to go down the Kyrie. We've got the melody on here already from that selection in bulletins yesterday. We can change that here if we'd like and just have, let's go back to the Gloria and just keep it all text for the moment. And so we can click on the Kyrie, set it to text, the standard tools here at the top that we've already talked about. And again, just a reminder that right now we're got the Kyrie from Divine Service Setting 3, but you have all of these other options, other versions of the Kyrie that you could click on if you want to replace the one in your slide deck. We'll go to the Gloria here, and I'll go ahead and bring that one back to text. Again, we have the caption option, text, melody, setting. In this case, this is one that includes some additional options, or 2 additional options, text and setting, and text and melody. And so those 2 options are referring to this first line here, or will affect the first line here that is either spoken or sung by the pastor. So if your pastor sings, is comfortable with singing those lines, then you can click just melody, and you can see right here, let me kind of note that out. Here's the pastor's line, and then the congregation responds beginning here and goes down the rest of the page. And so this would be sung by the pastor. But if your pastor is not one who sings, you might go with text and melody, and then that way pastor's part is here just spoken, glory be to God on high, and then the congregation responds with singing, and on earth peace, goodwill. And this is with melody, it's simply the melody, but there is the other option here to the left of it, text with the setting. So this will basically be the same thing, except it adds the 4 parts then to be sung, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, of the congregation's response. But pastors is still spoken here at the top. So keep in mind that depending on the element that you select, some of those options might be available there on the toolbar once you've clicked on the element. Let's go back just to text on all of these. Let's click on the next one, the collect of the day. Let's just go to text on that, and the associated slide with the collect is there. Let's go ahead to the rubric. I'll remove it. These are all changes. You don't have to remove rubrics. It's all up to you. I'm just showing you the process of editing and selecting elements, changing the way they look in the presentation, and apply some changes, some templates, and that's where we're heading right now. I'm going to go into the Old Testament lesson. We see that is what is selected, are the tab reads at the top. Again, we can work with the caption if we'd like. We can either remove or keep the text there. And then this is a new one that I want to talk about, the template that is being applied. Here on the end is just standard edit, move, and delete as well, but it's the template I want to talk about. If we move to the second slide here of the Old Testament lesson, you can see that the response, this is just the standard response to the content of the Old Testament lesson. All of the content is mainly here. We've got a little bit more of it here on the second slide with the response. Now, if I wanted to use a different template, and template just means is mainly talking about the response, and then also if there's any type of introduction to the reading. So when we click on this, it will be highlighted, the one that we currently have selected, which is this second one. And it's showing that the content of the scripture reading appears there, and it's just represented with the word content. It's pulling that in from the lectionary, and then it shows the response for this particular template. But let's scroll down and see if there's something else that might fit in this case. Here we have the daily office response, which has, I think, the L as leader. Oh Lord, have mercy on us, thanks be to God. If we scroll down a little farther, this would be a good one. This is the Old Testament lesson with introduction. And you can see that the template is providing the introduction and the response, and then the content is just kind of sandwiched right between those two. So let's go ahead and pick this Old Testament with introduction. And let me get back to that first slide. And now you see what has been added with that template. It's the Old Testament reading is from Ezekiel chapter 17, which matches with the lectionary scripture reading. And then if we go to slide 2, there is the response that's in that template as well. So that's just a way of, you don't have to use that particular template, but there are other templates here as you slide down the scroll bar. There's the introduction for the epistle, Old Testament response, introduction for the gospel, etc. We'll use some of those with the readings that are coming up. Next is the gradual, and the gradual was selected yesterday in the bulletin format, so that's where it carried through here to the PowerPoint presentation. So you really wouldn't have to make any other changes here unless there was something with the pointing and the psalm tone, if you were using a psalm tone, or else it might just be spoken. And again, the blue bar appears here showing that there's an option to the gradual, and so if we click on that, you might faintly see here we've selected the gradual yesterday, but we can faintly see that the psalm is there as an option as well. So we'll just keep it with the gradual. That's what we had in our bulletin yesterday. And I'll scroll down. Next is the epistle, as it shows here up in the tab. And let's look at our drop down for templates and scroll down to where the epistle is. And then that way, in this particular template, we have an introduction here and the response with the content of the scripture reading in between those two. So I'll click this one. It adds the introduction here, and then the response will be at the end. Let's go a little bit farther. Here's another rubric. I'll delete that. The Alleluia, that's the same one we chose yesterday. There's a blue bar here on the left showing some of the other options. Let's go then to the gospel reading. This one already has the template, the Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 4th chapter, which is what we chose yesterday in the bulletin format, so that came right over. And then yesterday, too, when we were talking about bulletin formats, we ended up adding the words of Christ in red, and so that also transferred over from the making that selection in bulletins over here to the PowerPoint. We can always change that in the PowerPoint format on the second half of this, or on the second portion of this training session, but we'll just go along with what is currently there. Let's see. We might just make it text and remove some of the singing there. Nicene Creed. Let's click on that. Again, the tab at the top shows Nicene Creed. You've got some options here on the right if you'd like to change it, and there also is the blue bar here on the left for options that are in the hymnal. We click on that. We then have the other creeds, Apostles' Creed, Athanasian Creed there as well that we can select from. We'll keep it with Nicene Creed. Rubric, delete, and we got another hymn here, hymn 500. We chose stanzas 1 and 4 in the bulletin. So I would think, here for the PowerPoint or for the presentation, you would want the same. If you are creating just a presentation, of course, you can make your own selections and choose your own stanzas, and the slides will adjust appropriately. We'll just go with 1 and 4 along with our bulletin. And let's say here after the gospel, which was here, Mark. Let's say that I did want to insert a slide here. I'll use the same example I gave yesterday. So the insert process is simply clicking on insert here at the top, and then choosing, if we just want to slide with the words children's message, it's a caption. So I'll choose, I want to insert a caption from the toolbar. There's plenty of tools up here in this particular row of options. You've got hymns, readings, prayers, propers, custom elements, or rights that you can insert into your PowerPoint slide deck. I just want a caption. Then when I hover over the slide deck here, that's a little bit odd that its insert point is kind of in the middle of a slide. Let's refresh here real quick. Working with a browser, it might have just got off a little bit. Let's go to insert, caption. Well, that is interesting. I'm going to take this insert point here, hoping that it's after the gospel. It's not. Chose the wrong one. Let's go ahead and just slide this down. There we go. I don't know what's happening there, but I'll work with the team afterwards. So here I've inserted in another slide. I don't need the word caption there. It's just letting me know what kind of slide that is. Let's just backspace over that and put children's message. I could capitalize that, but you get the idea. We talked about the Nicene Creed. We've got the hymn. We've got the sermon. Pastor could come here to the sermon slide and enter in the title of or topic of the sermon on the slide as well, so it gets presented as that way. We've got the votum. We've got another rubric. I'm going to speed up a little bit here. We've got the offertory, whether you want melody or just text. We've got another rubric. We've got a slide for the offerings. We've got another rubric here. We've got the prayer of the church. We'll be able to, after tomorrow's session, talking about the Let Us Pray subscription, which is a free subscription. It would replace this prayer of the church with the actual prayer for that week from the LCMS. And so that is a good free subscription to activate. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Another heading. We've got the preface here. I'll just change this to text. We've got an option bar here on the right. Or on the left, we can either have the proper preface in full or the abbreviated form of it. Let's keep the full one. We have the Sanctus. I'll remove the melody. We have the Lord's Prayer, making that text only. Words of our Lord, text only. See, now a lot of this too, instead of removing the melody from all of these, I could make my presentation format, which we'll talk about here in a minute, to where it just automatically by default shows text all the time instead of melody. And that would be the easiest way to do it. But I'm making these individual adjustments right here in the slide deck so that you get the experience of working with the toolbar and see me working with that in that way. The distribution. hymn. We've got a standing rubric here. Oh, let's see. Yeah, that's all text. Post-communion collect. Salutation. And then a hymn at the end. And then the final slide is the acknowledgments. It is important to have the slide as part of your presentation. That way, if you're streaming your service, you're giving the proper acknowledgments for copyright at the end. And I think you'll make YouTube happy by having those acknowledgments and the copyright information there at the end, or else they might take the video down. So that's our slide deck. Let's go ahead then and talk about formats here. And let me scroll back up to the top. All right, let's go back to document view. So our slide deck is still showing. We've made changes, edits, we've inserted some slides, changed the way some things look, used templates. Now we want to talk about the format itself. And so right now we're just using the presentation format called Basic. And we could tweak this Basic. This is what comes with the program. It's got a white background with black lettering. We could tweak this if we would like, and just here and there in certain areas. And to do that, we can click Edit. I'll click the Edit button, and that takes us to where presentation formats are edited. Now, let me also show another way of getting there. Let's go back to the previous screen. Again, we clicked on this Edit button, but there's also a way to get to it by clicking on the gear at the top. If you click on the settings icon, then presentation formats is right there in your menu, and you can click on that, and it will get you to the same place. Now, you'll initially, by default, you'll have basically two types of presentation formats, the basic and the iron. The rest of these are ones that I've made in other sessions and one that I've prepared to show you today, this 2024 one. And so you could create a number of other presentation formats that are unique and custom to what you'd like to do. To do that, you would be clicking on this button in the lower left corner for a new format. And then it will start you off with choosing one or the other, basic or iron to begin with. Let me show you what iron looks like. Let's click on basic here. Let me refresh the page. There we go. So basic is now showing white background with black lettering. The iron, which is the other default presentation, has this grayish background with a little image on the left side, and it's kind of showing you the way that would appear. And so you may want to use that one as an option, but you can also create your own. And I should also point out that what we have here in the preview down the center of the screen is not the service that we're currently working on. It is just an example of service elements. This is a heading slide. This is a hymn slide. Then we get here to a rubric slide, part of the service here with the responses, pastor, congregation. And so it's just giving us some examples of some of the slides that normally appear in a service, so that as we make changes, and most of the changes will be done here on the right side, it will show us a preview here in the center of what that change would look like on your slides. So we're talking about here on the left again, basic, iron. Let me give you an example of a reverse basic. All I did is I took the basic, started out with the basic format and then just reversed the colors. So then you've got a black background with white text on it. So if you want to keep your presentation in the church a little bit more muted, you have a black background and white lettering. We do have ways of bringing in backgrounds from Creative Worship, one of our subscriptions, and so something like Creative Worship could look like that. This is the same heading slide with one of the backgrounds from our Creative Worship. I've got another one here that just kind of has a evening or night background with then the service over on top of that background. And then one of our, again, one of our creative worship backgrounds, and it's actually the one for this quarter, third quarter, this coming week. This is what that would look like if you've subscribed to creative worship. You can use that background. It's got the little image here in the lower right corner, and then a yellowish type of background, and then you can set up your slides that way. So let's talk about creating a new format then to add to this. Let's base it on basic, and so it gives us a place for a new name. We'll just call this the webinar format. And there is a little dot that appears in front of it, meaning that there's a change made and it hasn't been saved yet. So all I've done is change the name of it. In order to remove that dot over there, I would need to click the Save button here in the lower right corner. I'll do that now, and you'll see that the dot then disappears. So while you're making changes, you can save your work. Just remember to always click that Save button in the lower right corner. Then we have some tabs here at the top. And there's style, there's layout, and there's content. And that will affect the way that your slides look. We're going to start with the style tab. This is where you can change the background. You can upload a background image. You can change the font used, making it bold, making the font larger, smaller. You can change the paragraphs, indentation, etc. I'm just going to talk about it generally at the moment. Layout is going to is where you set your slide size. So this is actually the first place I would go for presentation formats for PowerPoint, because what you need to do here, this is probably the first step that you should do right here when you're creating a new format, is you need to match the height and width of the resolution of the slide to what either your projector projects in the church, or what the size of your monitors that are out there, and you want to get that same resolution there. So let me kind of show you how that affects things. Right now we've got a slide here that's basically, as it shows here, 768 by 1024. A common setting for monitors in the sanctuary or for projecting sometimes can be 1080 by 1920. And you just fill in those numbers here at the top. And then right away you'll see how that has changed. The default font sizes suddenly gives us just our content right here in the upper left corner, and we want to increase the size so it's making use of the whole slide, and that way the font or the lettering, the words would be larger and people in the back of the church would be able to see. So first place to go, layout, set your slide size with the resolution from either your monitor or the projector you use out in the church. Here in layout, you can also set margins here on the lower half. And then in the content tab, you work with different sections. Here's for all headings. There's an option for rubrics. There's the option for hymns, for liturgy, and I believe the last one here is propers. And we'll make selections there as well. But let's start with style, or after we've set our layout, our slide size, and we'll just keep with the standard margins there. Now let's go to style. This is where we can change our background. There is a little circle here that's just white, letting us know that we've got a white background. I can click in that circle, gives us a little color block here with a sliding scale here on the right. You can just click your cursor at the top where the bar is, and then slide it anywhere along here for whatever type of background you would want. Feeling maybe kind of a purplish color today, and then you can click anywhere in this block to get a shade of purple. We could click here. That's pretty drastic, and that's in the upper right corner where my cursor is. We could click over here towards the left, and you get a nice pastel lavender. You can click down here a little lower, and I'm just going to continue to click different places here in the block, and you can see how it changes the background. So you'd be able to, pick whatever background color you want. I'll go with this one at the moment. We're not going to upload an image yet. Let's talk about the section here. Well, it's titled section. This is going to give us a drop down of different sections within the order of service. We've got the body, which is going to be most of the spoken parts, the hymns, spoken parts. We've got the headings, that's like the absolution and those slides that had the little plus sign in there. We've got the captions, which are these bolded lines here that we can work with. We've got the rubrics and the copyright. So these are the main 5 sections that you're working with. Let me make one change here real quick to add rubrics and headings real quick. And that way we've got an example of those slides here for the section. So if we're talking body, let's scroll down to where there's some content like here. This is a good one. So we've selected body. We're going to be adjusting this content here. Let's go ahead and choose a different font. Right now it's Verdana. Let's go to Cambria. You can click on the in the character cell there and then just scroll through the list like you would in Microsoft Word. And then you can adjust the size. Right now it's 40 point. Let's say that we go up to maybe 65. That fills up the slide pretty good. That's a pretty nice size possibly for the body parts of the slides. Now let's go to headings. To get to the heading, we've got to go to a heading slide. Here's a heading slide. It's showing that that's also Verdana. Let's go ahead and change that to Cambria as well. It's 52. We need something much larger than that. Let's go up to maybe 100. That's pretty good size. We can, remove the bold, keep the bold. We can remove the underline if we'd like. We can make it normal case with capital and lowercase letters. We can make it all caps. We can make it all lowercase, whatever your preference is there. Let's keep it with normal title case, and then you can even italicize it as well if you'd like. You can change the font color with the little circle there. We can change the paragraph readings, although we should do this more in the body. Let's go back to the body option. Get back here. All right, let's go with like the Kyrie slide. Right now it is aligned left. This would be aligned center, aligned right if you prefer. Or let's see, that last one doesn't really change. We'd have to go here. The button, let's see, hover over it, it says justify. So right now I'm going to be pressing this button, but what I want you to watch is this part of the screen. You can see where each sentence kind of ends at a different spot. This one close to the margin, this one a little further in, this one much further in. If you click justify, it makes it just a nice block here. We might want to move the indent level in a little bit. There is an option, the right indent, we could increase that a little bit. And you can see that we're getting a little more space here, not quite as much as we have over here. So I might make this 1.2 inches. Let's just make it 2 inches. So you can see how these paragraph settings can be used to change things. This last option over here on the right is line spacing. If I increased that from 2, let's go 1, 2, well, that kind of shows you what it looks like here with line spacing. You can adjust anything in between, 1.2, 1.1, now we're back at 1. And if, as I'm making these changes, you might be clicking save here in the lower right corner as you move along. Let's see, caption. Let's go ahead and set that to Cambria as well. Caption. This is real far off here. Invocation. So let's increase this size up to, let's say 90. That's pretty good. We'll just keep that black, keep things simple. The rubrics, where's a rubric slide? It might have been in there at the top. There it is. So this is an example of the rubric. We could also change this to Cambria. And we could increase that a little bit just by using, there's an up arrow and down arrow, so you can incrementally increase it if you'd like. And then the copyright, which is this information at the bottom of a hymn, at the last slide of the hymn. We could leave that the same. We can change the font used there. We could increase it just a little bit incrementally, make it 30 point. Let's see, I also wanted to show this heading slide. Let's go back here. There is, on heading, there is an option here at the bottom, text before and text after. That's what we saw a little bit earlier. If I were to put a plus sign there and a plus sign after, let's see. Save. I thought that would have added that particular cross that we saw in the heading a little bit earlier, but that doesn't appear to be the case. Let's see. Am I just missing something? We've got the heading. All right, I'm not going to worry about it, but that's normally where those little crosses appear, and it would put a cross to the right and a cross to the left of the heading slide. All right, another thing we could do just to show you how an image then is uploaded, and then, oh yeah, it's at the top of the hour. I need to bring this to a close. So let's talk about adding an image. I'll click the upload button that's right here for the image option. And I'll just use the same image that I use. This is this coming week's image from our creative worship. You can use any JPEG. You know, that's all this is a JPEG, but this is pre-designed just for this particular week. And then that replaces that purple background and gives us what we see here. All right. Layout. Oh, we should talk about content just a little bit. This is where in content you can make those changes kind of globally across your whole PowerPoint presentation by section. So this is where I pointed out headings, rubrics, hymns, and liturgy, etc. You can choose whether you want to show headings. We can just remove all headings. Whether we want to show all rubrics, or we can uncheck it and all rubrics would be removed for us. That way we don't have to do it individually on the slides as we did earlier. All hymns, this is where you could choose just to have them by default show as text or by default to show with the melody line. And they'll appear that way initially when you first open the PowerPoint view or the presentation view. You can also have caption placement. You know, there was a control on the toolbar for this, but you can set this globally for all elements right away with the format itself. So there's many things here in the format that will really facilitate editing. You won't have to do as much editing as I did today, unless you're doing some custom tweaking to it. Show stanzas right now, that's going to show the number, omit the number from the caption. So checking that box will remove the hymn number in this case. For liturgy, whether you want the liturgy visible or not, whether you want the liturgy to show up in text, in melody form, or in settings, if the setting is available, especially Divine Service Setting 3, how the caption placement happens with slides, and then using the symbols for speakers. Let's get to a slide here. So it's talking about the P and the C. If we uncheck the box, use symbols, then it's going to replace the symbols with the word pastor and congregation. So that can be set for your format. Emphasize decision fields. So what that's talking about here is the underline in when you're adding a rite like baptism and you mention the person's name who's being baptized, you can have those sections be underlined just to emphasize, you know, that's where the name is spoken. You can also remove the underline by unchecking the box, and then It's just there with name, his and her. And then finally, the propers, if you want them visible in your service, keep the check mark there, whether you want a text, melody, or setting options there. We've got caption placement, the caption format, whether by default we want to show chant pointing. So that's kind of the indicator there that will set the default for you. Whether you want verse numbers on your scripture readings, that's checked by default. Whether you want to show headings or not. Let's see, is there, let's show headings. There we go. So for this particular reading, what it does then, if you show headings, is it will show the headings from the scriptures itself. So the Sermon on the Mount heading is there, the Beatitudes is there. If we remove the headings, those will disappear. And then finally, the words of Christ in red, right here as a setting. Check the box. And then those will be turned red for your PowerPoint presentation. Now I'd have to do a little tweaking here to get the words off of the image, and I'd want to bring in the indented a little bit more from the right in the body. But those are all things I don't want to address that necessarily right now. So now that that's been saved, let's go back to our service where the presentation is at. Go to prepare presentation mode, and now we have the basic presentation on the screen right now, or the format, or we can go with the one that we just created here, or or really any of these, and instantly then your service will look the way it does stylistically, just based on the format that you have. All right, let's go ahead and yeah, I think all of that is covered. Okay, let's go ahead and bring up the slide here for support. Ways to get support through our online help center by clicking on the information center icon in the lower right corner of your screen. There is also a start a chat option within the application behind that information center circle. Let's go ahead and bring that up just real quick here, just to point that out. So while the screen is up, there's your little information access, and that's where you can search our online help articles. You've got the ability to start a chat, to send us an email, and then if you go into the email form, our phone number is listed there as well. So you can get help pretty easily right there on screen, but just to once again go over some of these, you can give us a call at the 800 number from 7:30 to 5, Monday through Friday, that's Central Time, and then email us at support@ctscph.org. All right, there's more training yet this week. There's tomorrow's session, and that will be on My Worship Resources and other add-ons. We've covered the first 3 already, and so we're kind of winding it down. Let's open this up for any questions that may not have been answered yet. I'm going to be reviewing those here. So please type in any questions you might still have into the questions window there. And remember, a recording will be emailed within 48 hours around that time. And then also, if you're watching this recording at a later date, please send your questions into support@cts.cph.org. I do want to say thank you for watching for those of you who have to go and are limited in time. And so thank you so much for spending this last hour and a few minutes with me. I hope you found it beneficial. And we'll open this up again for questions. I'll keep the questions window open, and I'll review some of these questions here that may not have been answered. Okay, let's see. All right, John has a good question here. Let's go ahead and yeah, Rod actually just answered him, but this is a good point. And let's go ahead and apply just the standard basic. Let me see if there's a slide here. What John asks is, where in the settings are you able to format so that the breaks in the text between slides are not so rough? Or do you just have to edit the individual slides once the presentation is built? So I'm looking for a slide that might be good in this case. Well, this is a reading. This isn't too bad. The reading just continues on. Sometimes the breaks, I think what he's talking about here, let's go to the previous slide. Sometimes the ending part of the sentences here at the bottom of the slide sometimes bleed into the kind of the border of the slide, or it might cut off some of the lettering. And what I do want to just point out is that what we're seeing here in the preview window is what we believe Microsoft PowerPoint to do, or what we anticipate them to, where they're going to, start a new slide. But we don't have control of that over that. And PowerPoint is just going to apply its own algorithms. So we do our best to give you as close to a representation of what we think the slide is going to look like in PowerPoint. But as John in his question kind of mentioned, that sometimes you may need to review your PowerPoint export and maybe make some slide adjustments in Microsoft PowerPoint because they might have sliced it just a little bit differently. But we apply those automatically, and sometimes we just don't have control over what Microsoft's going to interpret. But you can fix it on the back end. All right, let's see what else, if there's anything else here. I think Rod has answered most of them. Just checking. All right. Yeah, the important thing is that as you had questions and you asked them, that you got your question answered. It would be great to read over a lot of these questions for the rest of you, but that would take the webinar into even a longer period of time, and some people can't wait around that long to go through the whole Q&A of everything. So I apologize that we're not able to do that, but we want to keep as close to the hour as we can. Once again, I just want to thank you all for taking the time this morning and watching. And if we can be of any help at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And any of us in the support department would be more than happy to help you. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.